Greetings. Welcome to the Resonature Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Denton. I got a really fun conversation ahead with Christopher Gardner, Topher as I call him, and a buddy, a living Renaissance man. This guy is a dome builder, builds with earth, an authority on magnetism and electricity and polarity therapy and water structuring, a professional athlete, a professional football player, an astrologer. And we talked a lot about biochar. What is biochar? Its applications in agriculture, its applications in physical or clinical applications internally, and its significance with improving the soil health and its relationship with water. We talk about polarity therapy and massage therapy, the role of the practitioner, and coming from a place of humility and service, as well as tips for practitioners out there to ground themselves out. And we cover Ophiuchus as a unique astrological archetype, and a plug for the Elementals Conference coming up in May 8th through the 10th, 2026 in Missouri. This is something that Topher is putting on. Got some big time speakers coming to Missouri, to the fields of Missouri. We got Alex Zeck and Tom Barnett and Dr. Andrew Kaufman and yours truly. I'll be doing a presentation on ether, the element of ether and its role with plants, signatures, and medicine. So a couple other plugs before we get into the episode. I just want to say thank you to my nephew, Matteo Marinelli, who provided the piano part for our intro. This is a 14-year-old that recorded that piano part. And so we took it, myself and my son, my 3-year-old Davide, and we added some percussion and other elements to it. And so there you have it. It's a family band made with child labor, I guess. My son Davide, he says that the name of our band is Lightning Turtle. Ever heard of them? You will someday. And the one last thing, enrollment is open for studying with me the Foundations of Vital Herbalism course that runs from March 21st through October. We have in-person options. There's only about 8 spots left, as well as plenty of online spots available. So if you're interested in learning with me online about all the stuff about vitalism, how to be an herbalist, thinking for yourself, learning the foundations so that you can apply it for yourself and not just appealing to a book or appealing to a teacher or appealing to what's committed from memory. This is not this herb for this disease. It's understanding the architectural aspects and elements that we are seeing with every case, with every unique individual, and also applying them to the plants. If that's something that's interesting to you, go ahead and enroll or just inquire about payment options as well. Okay, and there's plenty of other stuff to talk about, or tippycanoeherbs.com for all of your medicinal herbal needs, but we'll take it away with Christopher Gardner. Ciao. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. Kyle Denton here, and I'm here with a guest, my friend Christopher Gardner, who I call Topher. And Topher and I had the opportunity to meet maybe almost 3.5 years ago at a festival in Missouri. And at these grounds that there's going to be another festival coming up that I'm actually really excited to talk to Topher about.
Yes.
And since then, we just kind of hit it off, and we had a friendship, and I've had a lot of fun thinking about one of the things that we like to joke about is that maybe we're distant relatives or something like that because of the shape of our face. And I think you mentioned that I look like one of your relatives.
You look like my grandfather, the nuclear physicist, the Mizell, the French side of my family.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, it's cool for me to think too, because one of the things that I think is really special is that, back in growing up in the 90s and 2000s, before there were cellular phones, like there was organic synchronicities when it came to phone stuff. There wasn't the aromatic synchronicity where something gets implanted in your head and you're like, I think I need new black shoes. And then you see a bunch of advertisements for new black shoes or something like that. But it was like the organic synchronicities where you think of something or you get that tingle, and then all of a sudden somebody calls or somebody pops in, and actually that happens so much more to me from you than anybody else right now, which is really cool. So one of the things that Topher reached out to me a few weeks ago and said, "Hey, interview me for your podcast, and I was thinking to myself, and a couple other questions, and I kind of blew that one off because I was like, I don't really have a podcast. I mean, I stream, and I have a couple hundred students that are like behind a paywall and stuff like that, but I don't really. And then a couple weeks passed by, and I'm just doing my thing in the morning routine, washing up and stuff, and I'm thinking about it. I'm like, wow, I really should do that. Topher was right. I really should. And while I was doing that, you wrote, "Hey, when are you going to interview me?" I said, all right. Somewhere in the ether, our ancestors are doing a little switchboard Rooney here and putting us together. And so thanks to God and thanks to you, here we are. This is a new podcast, and it's called the Resonature Podcast.
The Resonature. Nice.
Yeah, I wanted to make a neologism that's kind of like your podcast name. And so let me introduce you as a guest first, and we'll get into it. So Christopher Gardner, Topher, he is the host of the Biocharisma Podcast, and he's writing articles over on Substack. And to me, this is one of the best podcasts out there. It's not just because of the quality of the guest, but really, to me, it's how interesting this gentleman is right here. He's a dome builder, builds domes with earth. He's an inventor, an innovator. He's applying those innovations and inventions to off-grid life, many hats throughout his days. I would say he's an authority on the special ways of structuring water and finding the most beneficial ways to work with water and to have water work with us. He's a professional athlete in the past and with many accomplishments at the highest levels of football, a yogi. I would also say an authority on magnetism and polarity, bringing that to his massage therapy practice. And to me, in just my eyes, just a living Renaissance man, a living man, but also with a heart of gold. He's got this sparkle in his eyes, and also the founder of Black Gold Biochar, which is one of the things I really wanted to talk about most right now today. And throughout his podcast, and I highly recommend listening to it, he's taught me the word holotropic thinker, which the word means moving towards wholeness. And so another way of thinking about it is like taking data points from all this various states of consciousness, from spiritual to mundane and practical, and finding the patterns that relate a practical practice like sleeping or eating or taking a shit to a high level of spirituality. And the pattern or the throughput, this is just another way of saying pattern recognizer. And so the pattern that I see here that I want to focus on in this discussion is that which relates to the healing arts. And I mean arts specifically because art, such as building a structure, a dome, which is a sculpture, which is a resonant structure, healing the area inside, and for the benefit of the landscape and the movement of energy within it. And then also we could see from just the aspect of dome building, using the astrological principles. I forgot to mention he's an astrologer, to harvesting preparations of materials and the chironic aspects that work with your hands and how that relates to massage therapy, which is an obvious healing art. Zooming out from the building and seeing the considerations of the landscape and dowsing the flow of water within the whole, bringing it down to the micro of the unit, and then bringing that down into the soil with the biochar. That also could be applied in the benefit of the dwelling as well. So that's, one of my favorite things about Topher and his podcast is that what I just set up, we could go all this holotropic ways. We could go 360 like a sky dome above us, and it will all relate to all of these topics. But really, it's my pleasure to have you here as our first guest on the Resonature podcast. So welcome, Christopher Gardner, and it's great to have you, buddy.
Thank you so much, Kyle. I really appreciate it. I love the name, by the way. Resonature is perfect. You're a man after my own heart with Biocharisma, the Resonature. That's really cool. just with all that you just said, that was such a nice intro. I was doing an interview yesterday, and the same thing kind of came up. And the one thing that to me, the holotropic aspect of things is that it's all one thing. It just looks like it's it's a different facet. The one facet on one side of the diamond looks different than a facet on the other side of the diamond, but it's all just a different angle of the same diamond, right? And so, like, in the grace of my life is that God's thrown me in situations where, for all intents and purposes, I wasn't ready to be in. And because I was looking at these new situations with like a different set of eyes, I just looked at things differently, and then was able to essentially cross-pollinate what I was seeing in one venue, in another venue, in another venue, in another venue, because none of these venues I ever really trained for. They were always like a tangential thing. And so it's just really funny for me, because it's just like the specialists, and the irony was I was trained, like, where I got the most, I guess you'd say, fame was when you're a field goal kicker or a kickoff specialist in football. They actually call you, what your designation is specialist. And I've never felt like a specialist. Like, I am a generalist. I'm as like Piscean as you can get, in like, with that holotropic way of looking at things, just being like, zoom out to the widest, aperture, and then look in at the little specifics. And so it's really funny for me, because like I will end up becoming a specialist in certain things, but I don't ever start that way. That's not that like in every venue that I look at that, it just ends up happening through life experience. It's not something that was like, there wasn't a heavy intention to be a biochar maker, or a massage therapist, or an entrepreneur, or a dome builder. It was always just like God threw me in a situation, and it was like, hey, this is what's appropriate. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to do that. And what's fun about that is that it's always given me somewhat of like an outlaw feeling, because I'm not ever really the guy that anybody within that field wants to talk to. Because I'm not seeing it through the same lens that they're seeing it through. I'm just not. And like, birds of a feather flock together. Like, nobody wants to talk to the soil guy that's going to be relating to it like through massage, or the massage person that's talking to you about the phenomenology of clays in your dome building, or
with biochar in his fingers.
Or the dome builders that are, doing it this way. And I'm like, no, I've done all those. Actually, the Japanese star dome's the way to go. Like, I'm always the fly in the ointment. And I guess that's just my function in life, is to kind of like, jostle whatever venue I'm put in.
There's so many things, so many ways I want to go here. But the first is you were relating the diamond metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
and then we talked about biochar.
Yes.
And I was just playing with a piece of your biochar earlier, by the way,
Yes.
from you just launched the company Black Gold Biochar. And I've made my own biochar, but your biochar is so awesome. It is so much better.
Yes.
And so one of the things that I was looking at a piece of the biochar, and you were so generous to send me a piece of a nice bag of hickory biochar. And hickory, by the way, for those who aren't familiar with the plants, I mean, the only thing that takes down a hickory is another big tree that falls on top of it, or a super sharp chainsaw. Like, right. This is some hard wood. I mean, hickory is Louisville slugger, axe hammers, axe handles and hammer handles. This is a type of wood that can take a lot of stress. And so what I had in my hand was a piece of the wood of the hickory that he had pyrolyzed into biochar, and I could now crush it in my hands and crush it in my fingers. And before I could do that, I could see I could move it around in my hands and I could see all of this light coming through. Now I was in a dark space, but it still captured all of this light. And it was a really cool phenomenon because it's something I've noticed in my own biochar making too, is what I'm wondering. First of all, I was wondering, was I doing it right? Or was it like some volatile oils that were left on top of it or something like that? And so now that I see that, it's coming through in yours, I'm thinking, what is the phenomenon that is creating this, this light, patterning that I'm observing? And you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah. Well, the way that we actually create our biochar, I can't get into like the full process of it. The easiest way I can explain it from a technical standpoint is your best biochar is when your heat curve does like an exponential thing. So if you're starting at like 100 degrees, then 150, then 200, then 400, and then 1200, and then 2000. Like when you do that, and our kilns are made that way, where once all the off gassing starts from our biomass, that off gassing is then recycled back into the kiln, and that creates a very, very, very fast heat curve. And so when you get that heat curve, what occurs is you get a lot of pressure. And the pressure is what's making those little micro diamonds. The pressure is what's causing that iridescence, because the iridescence is essentially the oils that are being released, the volatiles, the sulfur component of the cellulose. It's being released, but then it's under positive pressure, because the vessel we like, an alchemist would do, we're essentially cooking. A retort is a fancy way of saying an anthenor
Mhm.
in alchemy. And so you get this pressure heat dynamic, because whenever, like, everybody out there can think of steam. If you have like a pressure cooker and the water starts to boil, you'll have like a little valve that will release a little shot of steam. And if that ever got clogged, you'd end up having like the bomb from all the pressure inside there. And so depending on the fuel, like the hickory that you brought up, that biomass ends up being its fuel. And the reason why hickory is so strong, one of the reasons why, is because it has a lot of oil in it. So you'll find those things that have a lot of oil in it get that iridescence and get a higher pressure when we cook it. And I'm getting really bespoke with all my different types of char, because like whether I'm doing like a coffee grinds char or a hickory char or an oak leaf char or a bamboo char, like they have different patterning. And you and I have geeked out before. I think I've sent you messages about like, I'll be making char, my biochar, and then like say I'm doing it in my yard and I actually do it from something from my yard, like oak leaves. After the reduction has finished, it feels like I can see the oak trees for the first time. It's like all the oak trees are now, open to my vision. Whereas before they were just like images. But once the sulfur aspect is released from, their biomass, now I can actually like have an interaction with them. And so to me, once again, I backed into the whole alchemy thing. I didn't try to become an alchemist. I'm just seeing like over and over and over again, like I'm doing this with pine needles, and the pine needle reduction is amazing because there's so many terpenes in the pine needles. And then afterwards, like all the pine trees are just like singing. They're like, oh, and I'm like really, really aware of their consciousness after I reduce their needles. Like there's so many weird things like that I'm still, just through practice, just through actually, doing things and not just like, contemplating it or reading it in a book, like actually proactively, gathering, taking the care to dry, doing all the things, because you do all these things for your practice too, is like, so much of the process of getting to an end result with natural substances is the collection and the drying and the preparing the space. And I think all of those things point to intention. and that shows an intentional type of way of going about things. And for me, I've known ever since I turned 30, since my first Saturn return, I've known internally, like, I don't want to do anything that's a harm. Like I was being, like, there were so many things in my younger life that I was being, pushed towards that I didn't feel good about, because I could tell that these things that we were profiteering off of, dishonor, distrust, gamesmanship, like all these things that in my consciousness I didn't want to perpetuate. And so I like literally drew the line in the sand and was like, no, I only want to be a benefit. Like, that's what I want to be. I want to be a benefit. And so in that, God just was like, okay, here, like, you're going to get into nature. And then all these things, like, nature just kept showing me how abundant, like, God kept showing me his abundance through nature. It's just like, no, you learn to do this appropriately. There's like endless amounts of abundance in this. And so that's sort of what I feel like with doing these reductions in the biochar, or like with building, buildings out of earth, or any of these things. It's just like literally there's an endless amount of raw material. It just takes a little time and intention to see it through to its fruition.
Yeah, it's amazing. The working with nature really does show the spell of scarcity
Yes.
and how to break it, and also the joy of what comes from the responsibility of output of work towards benefit, like that amount, that how that increases joy, the
Mm-hmm.
resonance of joy, which is really aligned to me with like actual health and vitality.
Yes.
And so anyway, I wanted to get into like what is biochar for our listeners, but before I do, I really wanted to tag on to what you said about seeing the consciousness of the trees, of the oak tree, and within the patterning of the leaf. And one of the things that kind of occurred to me was from maybe like invoking Steiner's way of thinking, is the kingdoms, or the spheres, the mineral sphere, which contains the capacity for memory, and the plant sphere, the next one up, which is called the etheric sphere. And that which separates the etheric sphere from the mineral sphere, as it's physically active here in this realm, is water. So
Right.
water running through the minerals is what gives the life and the vitality to plants and allows them to grow. And as they do, they get tickled with the influence of the next sphere, which is the astral sphere, which I like to call like the animal sphere. And for people who are like, that's a little too esoteric, we could think of like the autonomic nervous system: fight, flight, rest, digest. And a really good example of that is happening in my backyard at night. Some bucks that are bucking it up. Like, they have their antlers, which are like literal projections of spiraling astral movement out of their head, that they use to try to find out who's going to, be in charge of the harem and and be the first one to eat. You know what I mean? And so that's the astral body. And when the plants get influenced by this sphere, that's where they get their warmth. And that's the warmth. Another way of saying the warmth of plants is their volatile oils.
Right.
So in the pyrolysis and the alchemical process that you have introduced with biochar, which is the negretto phase,
Mm-hmm.
you are cooking off of that astral influence. You are erasing the water aspect of the etheric body of the plant, leaving it with a mineral, but permissible because it was the imprint of the from the etheric body as a plant to begin with, or let's just say biology, because some people use bones and stuff in biochar process. That it invites that etheric, it invites the water back into it.
Yes.
Am I kind of in the ballpark with that assessment?
I mean, completely, because it's really kind of funny. Water is a diamagnetic molecule. if you believe in molecules. But the best way to say it is the relationship of hydrogen to oxygen that appears as a fluid is very diamagnetic. And the most diamagnetic substance that we know of is pyrolyzed carbon, which is what biochar is. And so birds of a feather flock together. It will.
Would you mind describing what diamagnetic means? What's the definition of that?
Diamagnetic, di is like 2, right? So it gives a direction. And so the best way to think about it is people nowadays are getting into, ever since COVID's hit, people got all, in fear of, it's not, I'm trying to remember what people are calling it, graphene. So graphite, everybody has known about graphite forever, which is just carbon that they laminate together to make these like really strong sheets. Well, when you get biochar or, pyrolyzed carbon down to 1 molecule in thickness, they call that graphene. And what they find with graphene is that graphene is the most diamagnetic substance known to man. So it sends a signal in one direction flawlessly. There's no latency, like 0 latency. So if you string a bunch of these, graphene molecules together, you can send something from, say you were to string that from here to, like 1,000 miles, it would essentially be an instantaneous signal. There would not be any signal loss. There wouldn't be, the signal to noise ratio is perfect. And now they find that it's actually the same way with electricity. You could send, amps through the graphene, and you're not going to lose any of your amplitude. So it's one of these perfect transmitters because it's a perfectly dipolar molecule. So it has a perfect negative and a perfect positive. Most of the magnets that we know of, the magnet, like say this was a magnet, right? And this was positive and this was negative. If you were to really see the magnetic field of it, the North Pole, the positive pole, and the South Pole, the negative pole, there are actually 2 poles in one on each side. So there's actually 4 poles. You have a strong north with a really weak south, and then you'd have a strong south with a really weak north. Well, graphene, because it's perfectly diamagnetic, doesn't have that. It's a perfect positive or a perfect north and a perfect south. And so the best way I can say it is wherever you have these combinations of these diamagnetic materials, you get direction. You receive direction. And like you're saying, from the etheric, I'm a simple guy. Like I love the Lord's Prayer, let thy will be done. That to me is like when you become, especially as the male component, like, I have as a man, as somebody that feels my maleness, that's a very diamagnetic energy because we give direction. Whereas paramagnetic is sort of like attracted and repulsed in all directions, right? The diamagnetic nature of us is like, no, this is the direction. This is where we're going. And like the more firm that is, the more it can actually structure those things around it. And we see that with water. Like the biochar in and of itself is almost a perfect structuring agent for water because it's very porous. Like the water that goes through it will go through these little microcavitations as it's going through it, and it loves to microcavitate because then it changes the structure of the relationship of hydrogen to oxygen to be more like a battery would be. And then also because of that porosity in the diamagnetism, it in a way of doing it without actually adding any type of electrical charge, it actually creates what Gerald Pollack said is the exclusion zone. In the exclusion zone, once again, you have a very strong positive side and a very strong negative side. So what you end up having is an etheric condenser at that time. I wouldn't even say it's just etheric. I think it's just a pure condenser that is also working on the etheric level of things. I had a great interview with Veda Austin, and her and Dr. Tom Cowan, they're both like, dude, it's all the water. Like, it's all the water. And that like leans back on my studying of Victor Schauberger 20 years ago. It's just like, it is all the water. If you get the water, and I could get into the incommensurate geometry of this hydrogen to oxygen, that's like to me, that's like the big reveal in all of this. But like essentially the water is acting as that medium, as you so perfectly put, that is essentially condensing information into what we have around us, right? And so when you can give it a medium where it can perfectly condense into that, where also at the same time it's safe in the current environment we're in, because the thing that we're dealing with now is a lot of electrosmog. Almost anywhere you go, unless you're like, out in the Klondike, or you're like, who even knows if there's anywhere that you can go on this planet without some sort of EMF intrusion. But the nice thing about the biochar is because it's so diamagnetic, but because it's, we don't break it down to its graphene level, it's actually, billions and billions of molecules thick. You have all these diamagnetic things pointing in different directions. So what that ends up doing is it ends up stopping EMF propagation. It essentially reflects it into oblivion. Like any EMF that's coming towards it, especially like a microwave vibration, that frequency range, when it hits this super diamagnetic material, it just totally cancels it.
Is this kind of like a higher order principle of how carbon in general, or charcoal, purifies water the same way? Is that kind
Yeah,
of like a higher level principle where just by virtue of the way that it reflects things, and so you could also use that for the purification of toxicity in the soil, other than the electromagnetics, or what are some
yeah,
of the benefits for the soil?
yeah. The nice thing, so both charcoal and biochar will do that. Where biochar is different is it carries a net negative charge, where charcoal doesn't. Charcoal is carbon, but it's had a secondary oxidative stress from oxygen hitting it during the reduction process. So it actually carries a net positive charge. So it doesn't absorb reactive oxygen species like biochar does. Biochar will, if there's a reactive oxygen species around it, which is, just to be simple about it, like your ROSs, all those critters they're not beneficial to our plant roots. They're not beneficial to our internal being at all. Whenever they show up in mass, it's usually showing you that there's a high diseased state. So one of the things that biochar is doing, especially in some of our bigger farms where we're giving this to animals, is that it greatly reduces their need for any type of inoculation, probiotic, antibiotic, because what it's doing is it's essentially neutralizing all the reactive oxygen species in their gut biome and also in their waste. And so pig farms that are buying from, like, I would say over half of our sales at the moment are to pig and chicken farms, just because it eliminates the smell. And
Wow, that's amazing. So yeah, you've opened up a whole new category to talk about here, because we could talk about the benefits that most people are entering in with biochar, which is like applying it to their soil, top dressing it, or putting it in with their with the way that they prepare the soil for seedlings and stuff like that. And I'd love for you to get into that too. But here now we're circling back to the more bespoken aspects, which, by the way, this is an awesome word.
Yes, right?
But just like the crafted um, ways that you can generalize and also find specialties at the same way, at the same time, in the word be spoken too, and in the consuming of biochar, and
Yes.
not just for animals. And when you're talking about like giving it to the chickens, where you're talking about like they're consuming it,
Yep.
or it's like in
Yeah,
their
yeah.
coop, or both.
We put it in their feed. We'll put it in their bird feeders. Some of the bigger chicken farms, they'll put it actually out in like where they're pecking, like where they go out into the field and stuff like that. They'll just, go ahead and put the biochar down there. They'll eat it out in the field. And we don't really sell to like, Tyson or any of like the commercial chicken, like those types of like factory
They're
farm stuff.
they're not
But
going to be using biochar.
yeah,
No.
but for like the bigger operations that are organic and are trying to do free range, they'll put it right in their feed. And so what occurs is it gets in, chickens, they need, something rough in their gullet, and it's like perfect for them. Cause just like you said with the hickory, right? Hickory, I've destroyed many a chain on a chainsaw cutting through hickory, but after we do the hickory char, like you can just, crumple it, to whatever fineness you want. When chickens get that in their gullet and they're eating, it's like perfect for them. It cleans them out. Any of the ROSs, the reactive oxygen species that are in the chicken GI tract. I don't know what they call that for chickens. It just cleans them. And so, most people that know anything about, gardening or farming, everybody knows that chicken poo is like normally like really hot. They call it hot. You have to let it mellow. Like the poo ends up being able to be like composted much, much faster. Um, like we're still kind of new in this. Like we're only 3 years into studying it with animals. We always knew it was going to be beneficial just because hospitals use it for humans when they're in toxic shock. Like the first thing that happens if you're admitted to an ER because you've, ate or drank something that was toxic, they will give you activated carbon. Well, activated carbon is biochar. And I did a podcast with the nutrition detective, Dr. Smith, Garrett Smith, and he's talking about he has this under the scope now because he has so many people that he's been solving their toxic bile problems. That's his specialty is the bile is like the waste for those of you out there from your liver. And depending on how you've been able to eliminate waste from your body, sometimes that bile gets backed up. And in the United States, because we are like by far exposed to the most chemicals and the most different chemicals that there are, a lot of our lymphatic system and our glymphatic system and all the systems that eliminate these things, they get really backed up. And where it first shows its ugly head is in our bile. And so he's like, we became like, really fast friends because the biochar is like magnificent for helping, extract the toxic bile out of one system. Like you'll see, like if you're just taking it at home, just as like a supplement, like I make biochar toothpaste. And it's funny because my teeth look black when I do it, but I'll swallow the toothpaste. And when I was first started doing this might be TMI, but I'm going to say it anyway. I was seeing biofilms in my waist. There was literally biofilm, and I was like, "What's this oil slick?" That I'm seeing in the porcelain god over there. And it turned out that was like a biofilm. Well, that's what Dr. Garrett Smith was talking about. He's like, if you haven't had those release states on a consistent basis, because most of us are being exposed to so many chemicals, you need something like the biochar to pull it out of your body.
Yeah, in the healing health world, I guess, like the trending health world, that would be called like a binder, right? Something
Yeah.
that's like binding,
Yes.
but considering that some of these binders might commercially be grown in cesspools of chemicals and things like that, or harvested in the case of like bentonite clay and some like sketchy practices or things like that. Having something that's made you know in this uh the manner that you make it, which is artisanal, is like consuming artisanal and uh trees of the you know this type of stuff of the your local biosphere, but also like local to the Midwest, something that anybody could relate to, like pine and hickory.
Right. And
Um,
another thing too is like I was really big in the world of, doing the turpentine cleanse. And I've worked with a bunch of different doctors that kind of spearheaded the knowledge, the reassertment of the knowledge of using that type of solvent to help, clean your system. I'll tell you, if you're doing a biochar cleanse, or excuse me, you're doing a turpentine cleanse, and then you happen to have biochar of pine needle to help extract, whatever is wanting to get out of your system, the resonance between those two things is much greater than like saying, somebody getting some sort of, because most of the biochar that's made out of there for medical purposes, they're taking it from paper. And that paper pulp it's usually a recycled product. So I have a lot of confidence that if it's true biochar, you don't have anything to worry about. But the thing that I've seen in the industry, especially with water filtration, is they'll tell you, oh, you have a carbon water filter. And then you go ahead and take the water filter apart, and then you separate the carbon from the fill, and only 10% of the filter is carbon. All the rest of it's plastic. Like literal, like plastic beads with a little bit of carbon in there. And they do the same thing with all these different, like depending on the product of who you're buying from. Like I see there's biochar at Walmart now, biochar pellets. So I bought some, and I was I was looking at it, and I was like, oh, those are the same pellets, because I didn't just jump, like when I moved back to the States, I just didn't start selling this stuff. I like took my time to like find the processes by which to source materials, who's doing what, where, and how, and all the rest of it, because I wasn't going to make the same mistakes I made when I lived abroad. And so I was like, oh, those biochar pellets are just wood pellets that have been fired. Well, I know how they make those wood pellets, because almost all the wood pellets in the country come from my area. They're literally like the Smith Mill that's right down the road from me. Like they're the ones that supply all these wood pellets. Well, I know what they have in them, and I know most of it isn't biochar. Like, because for it to be biochar, I think that the ATM, I forget the regulation thing. They're only saying it has to be like 10 to 15% actually pyrolyzed wood. The rest of it could be just charcoal. So like I'm dealing with, like, because I'm sort of a nerd and an autist in this way, is like people are always telling me, oh, well, I made this fire pit outside, and I'm and I quenched it. And I was like, oh, yeah. Well, what you have left, about 10 to 15% of that's biochar. The rest of it's charcoal. And they're like, well, what does that mean? Like, how is that any different? And I'm like, well, the charcoal is going to leach from your soil, and the biochar is going to actually be a biocondenser for your soil. They're kind of doing the same thing in opposite directions. So that's why I've been educating for so long. That's why my podcast, I call it the Biocharisma Podcast. I've been talking about this for 10 years, is just because the direction in which you're going, like you might be doing the same thing, but if you're doing it in an opposite direction, that makes a huge difference. It's literally 180 degrees. So
I want to talk about this different directions now too, because You mentioned also earlier your massage therapy practice, which is, as you call, polarity therapy, and how you can relate that to to people from a soil scientist. I don't know if scientist is the right word, but from a soil, aficionado
Yes.
way of being. So, I would love to hear about your this polarity therapy practice, and just to share it with the audience as well.
Sure. I was originally trained in effleurage, which was Swedish massage. I mean, I was originally trained by my family. Like growing up, my parents massaged each other, especially my dad would massage my mom. My mom was an RN, and so she worked a lot of hours on her feet. I always saw her joy and relief with my dad massaging her. So I just, touch is my love language, right? Like I was just kind of bred that way. And I remember always having that association, just even as a teenager, young man, and everything like that. Like my propensity with people was when there was something wrong was to lay hands on them. That was just my natural propensity. And I had a girlfriend that was a kinesiologist, and I was always massaging her. And I was playing professional football at the time, so I had a lot of time on my hands because, like, when you're in that field, like you practice maybe a couple hours a day, and you play one time a week. And I had a lot of discretionary income. And she's like, you're better than any of the massage therapists that we have in our clinic. She's like, you should get licensed. You should go to school and get licensed. And I had all day I needed something to do and I was already doing it. So I was like, sure. And I did. And I like immediately, like with the guys that I was playing with and the trainers that I was training with, cause I was always like into sports science and things like that. I just saw so many of the leverages and so many of the things that I knew were so beneficial from the athletic perspective, or the very, very high end athletes. And the way I define high end athlete is somebody that can translate what they want to do in their head to actually locomotion. They can actually do it physically. And so these people from a proprioception perspective were much more conscious than just your average Joe. It's the exact opposite. The different tropes, the different stereotypes, that people give jocks. I found it to be the exact opposite. Like I would work on some of these, pro athletes, all pro athletes, some of them, some NBA all-stars, and like they could tell me where the energy was running and all this stuff. So in my formative years of doing effleurage, I was also doing Thai massage because my stepmother was from Thailand. I grew up always getting Thai massages, and I was working on these like giant individuals. Like when you're massaging somebody that's 6'10", you can't put them on a massage table. So I'd throw them on the ground and do Thai massage. And so I'd have all these leverages where I was using the heel of my foot. In fact, I had for like a year, my business card was healing massage, like I was doing all these things like where, because I'm only 5'9", and most of these guys were, 6'5" or taller, I literally had to like put them on a mat. I carried a futon around, and I would just essentially be putting them in wrestling leverages and like using all, like you could imagine like a pro wrestler, like just like totally, using their body weight and my body weight to get the releases that were needed. And I was like, this is kind of cool. And then I learned, I took this extended class in Lomi Lomi, and I loved it because that was really effective for working out the adhesions in my body. And so after like 7 or 8 years of doing this, I ended up working on a bunch of midwives. And this one particular midwife, she was gifted a massage from my best friend who was pregnant. And she was like, I was massaging her, and she's like, oh, I didn't know that you were a polarity therapist. And I'm like, what's polarity therapy? And so she started to explain it to me about Dr. Randolph Stone and, this guy that, did this whole thing in the 50s and he named it that. And I was like, I'm literally just doing what I learned, through everything I just explained. And also in India, they called this was my training in Ayurvedic massage with like the different, like, in India, they deal with mudras and the different polarities in the hands and your palm chakras. And I was glad that I got to live in India before it got like completely Americanized, like from like I feel like I got some of the old school gravy when I was there. And so she said, "Oh, that's polarity therapy." So I went up to Austin, Texas and got registered as a polarity therapist, but it was literally all the same stuff that I already knew from before. Because all polarity therapy is when you are touching somebody else, you are now effectively a circuit. So there's a loop current. You'll hear me always talking about loop currents. And like when you become sensitive enough, like with Eileen McCusick and the other people that do any type of tuning forks and stuff like that, there's a loop. The second you think of somebody, there's a loop current. The second they think of you, there's a loop current. But there's something to be said about physical proximity. You could say physical proximity a lot of times heightens the amplitude of the exchange. Okay. And so I was already very aware of this because a lot of the men that I worked on were like supremely embodied athletes. And they were teaching me, and like they would say something's running, and then I'd register it myself, and I'd be like, oh, and I wasn't a schmuck in my own right. Like I had pretty decent athleticism and knowledge and things like that. So there was just this like, once again, it was just like the grace of like being thrown into venues with like people that were better than me. And I would just listen to what they were saying. I was like, oh, okay. And then at the same time that all this was kind of happening for me, I had been living in an ashram where our training was in Vedanta Advaita. And essentially the best way you could say that is where you're separating I shouldn't even say you're separating. You become aware of the witnessing awareness prior to all activity. And that's very beneficial when you're working with people.
It's like behind the fourth wall, or like
Yeah,
the fourth wall.
it's the fourth wall.
Yeah.
Almost, I would say 99% of people in their waking state are identified with the set, They're almost never aware of the fourth wall. And so the whole Vedanta Advaita thing was like the best way you could liken it to like the modern, North American is you could say, it says in the Bible to pray without ceasing. That is very specific. And then Jesus says, you are in this world, but you're not of it. Well, if you're to take those two sayings and meld them together, that is Vedanta Advaita. To pray without ceasing is to always be aware of your jurisdiction with your creator. When you're aware of that aspect of self that is supremely effortless and has no activity in it, you become a throughput line for thy will. That's just what happens. And when that's occurring, all the activity that's occurring is going to occur. Like you're not at the stage of being like, oh, if I do this, then that. That's like, I won't say it's remedial, and I understand that that's a necessary thing. But when you're in the cut of knowing that part of you that is completely and utterly sitting with God, that part of you, everyone touches every night when they fall asleep. that part of you is the aspect of self that that people that are tired, that's what they're so longing for, is just to put it all down. When you're going to bed and right before your conscious awareness dips out, you're just like, F it, I'm out. You're doing that so you can actually sit with God, you can be revitalized in that presence, right? And now I know most people don't see it that way, but that is the mechanism that's occurring. Well, I just happen to be able to be in that state a lot, and it reminded me of the flow state. Because when I was an athlete, I had this really hard time understanding why when I wasn't doing it, I performed my best. And when I was really trying really hard to do it, I never performed like I did when I wasn't doing it. And then I read these books about the flow state and oh, you were in the flow state and you were in the zone. As an athlete, they called it being in the zone. Well, I noticed the same thing in body work. In body work, a circuit would be established with whoever I was working on. And the times that I was I know exactly what to do and blah, 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 blah. Maybe the body work was good, but every time there was no doer, there was a remedy state. There was a resolution. Every time. Every time. And then that really made me reflect on the whole bearing witness for God. Wait a minute. Thy will be done. Okay, I don't know God's will. So for me to come into a situation and make the proclamation and put my flag in the ground and say, this is what's going to happen. Like a lot of doctors, I am the indoctrinated. I know. It's the exact opposite. It's more like, I have no idea. And then you're just in the moment and you're letting the situation inform you. You're letting the circuit and the dynamic of knowing thyself and then being with other and just being, in that circuit, like I said, where there's instantaneous communication. And then there is the remedy state is shown, right? That was magnificent for me. And in the polarity, and that's kind of that's actually kind of what brought me to biochar, because I was doing that with gardening. I keep telling people, when I went down to Costa Rica, I was an idiot. I thought I knew things. And within 3 years, I had no money. My farm was dying. My old relationship was dying. Everything was dying because I was arrogant. And in all the new things that I was learning, in all those things, and one of them was gardening. And I wasn't being in the zone. I didn't have that level of comfort in that venue to just listen. But then I got there because I was being humbled. And I told my friend Itai, who was a master permaculturist, I was telling him what was happening on my farm. And then he told me, hey, look into Terra Preta. And I looked into it, and then it was oh. And it changed my fortunes completely, because I was just, it allowed me just to really witness the way nature wanted to do things. And so I would say the massage taught me to do that, because massage was don't come into this with a preconceived notion. I mean, obviously you're going to have some conceptions oh, that's a body. It has 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, and a torso. This person's an ectomorph or an endomorph. Of course there's those things. And then with all the Ayurvedic training I had with, oh, their pores are big, their pores are small, their hair is fine, their hair is all those things. And then of course, muddying through a person's story about themselves is always probably the biggest thing. But it all would resolve if I would just be in the moment and be in the system. And then that has actually spread into working with things out in nature per se. Because humans are like the most nature there is. But like dealing with plants and herbs and like, let's just say landscapes. The whole practice of body work always leads me to a new insight out there. I get the notion of what's said in the Bible, like we are the Mazzaroth. We are the we are the quintessence of nature, like that is condensed in our form. We're made in the image and likeness. We're like the aggregation of the information is the human form. And then that's what gives us the capacity to steward land effectively, I think.
Your story parallels mine in a lot of ways. I came to be an herbalist because of I got injured. I was riding my bike and I got hit by a car.
Oh,
And along the process of like trying to get myself better, my wife learned Panchakarma Ayurvedic massage
nice.
and started just to heal me, basically. She was my girlfriend at the time and she was living overseas, but that's how that's how lucky of a guy I am to have a woman like that. And then from there, she learned Thai massage, which was really cool. She'd come to visit us and same thing. We'd throw down a big old futon mat and just start rolling around. And it was really fun. And so from that's what, it was like, oh, okay, she wanted to come to the States to learn this. And she found that there was this Ayurveda school in my town. And it was one of the big ones in America. And I was like, oh, I'll go there. And so I started learning Ayurveda. And this was a long time ago. Since then, it was great because I learned the Ayurvedic herbs. I learned all the science of life. I learned a lot of the techniques and everything like that. And from there, I wanted to learn more about Western herbs. But it brought me to clinical herbalism, which reminds me of the story of a client that I had yesterday. And all of this kind of like tying into what you were just saying, which is this client was. And by the way, I also work with tuning forks as not only diagnostic, but healing technique. So for me, I didn't grow up with like loving touch. And I think that's so important that you were talking about that in growing up, because that's something that we have in our family now. Like we're all about rolling around and diffusing our energy at the end of the day. And I really feel like I'm absorbing some of the light and closeness of God with my two young kids when I'm rolling around, and it also helps them fall asleep at night and stuff like that. So touch is huge. But being in my conditioned state now, where I'm kind of like a very airy Aquarian bodied person, like the touch of another human being can feel really intense for me. Another way of saying it is that I am very sensitive to the circuitry that occurs with hands-on. So I really like working with tuning forks. But one of the things that I do is I still pulse test. And I always make a proclamation. This is something my teacher taught me, was when we're feeling the pulse, we're not feeling it in the same way that a doctor is, which is just like chronos, time. I'm feeling the qualitative aspects of the pulse. I say, the pulse will rise to my fingers and go no further. So I'm trying to just really feel to feel it and ground it out. So
Right.
when I first heard that, it's like the pulse will rise to my fingers and go no further. I recall there was times when I didn't make this proclamation, and I really felt like whatever was going on with the intake of that client was kind of left with me, and I needed to, I don't know, there was some practices that I've done and learned how to do to kind of like ground that out for myself. But it's really important for me to be able to ground that out. But then also the awareness of that conduit that I'm kind of taking on that charge. And that charge comes from not only touching and doing the pulse, not only sitting and listening, but the moment that they enter in the shop, the moment that they think to themselves, I'm going to make an appointment. The moment that they look on Google for an herbalist. All of these, like from the old astrologers would make a decumbiture chart from the moment of, like, seeking out the care. And this client, classic, I would say the most textbook case for what I thought was the right herb, like black cohosh. Black cohosh is an herb that resembles the cerebral spinal fluid. Like the flower of the black cohosh looks like the flower of the like the flower of it. It's like this beautiful golden. It's like waves. It's a spine curve plant. At the bottom of the black cohosh, the roots, another name for it is black snake root. So it's got this, like, it looks like a den of snakes. So it really illustrates actually like the Mazzaroth, because of like the Scorpio nature underneath the ground and everything like that. Well, a black cohosh person is somebody who is brooding like a Scorpio, brooding with their depression, with their resentment, has maybe some indications of cerebral spinal fluid congestion because of a injury, a concussion, a whiplash, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And a little, maybe even darker complected, think like kind of like goth vibes, sort of, but not always, like maybe they're not, the gothic type of person, but there's just something about them that is like brooding. And so I'm like, oh, perfect. We found the plant. And so we test it. And this is thy will be done. This is me. Now, when you say going into the zone, in all these books, I also read In the Zone by, I can't remember the author, back when I was like, like 19 years old, because I wanted to learn how to hit a golf ball a little bit better. And the thing about being in the zone is, yes, it's a neutral position, but you got to work. You got to work to get there. You got to train.
Preparation is a part of the zone.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the athlete doesn't just show up and they're in the zone. They're not, they might be born with the gift of talent, in your case as well. You got to train, and you got to train, and you got to train. And then you realize, yes, thy will be done. And so I do a forms of muscle testing and playing with the herbs, and even an etheric test where I could just write the name of the herb. It's funny because that's what Adam does in the Bible. He just names something, and then by naming it and just putting the plant, the name of the plant in their hand, it changes the quality of their pulse. It's amazing. It wasn't it. The pulse retreated, it hardened, it almost like it went under the table. But if me and my ego, and I know what's going to take to heal this person. I know the right herb, a specific herb, and there's my ego right there. Right. There's my thinking mind. And in order for me to be this conduit, this neutral conduit that doesn't take on the energy of my client, I have to get behind that and just allow the test to reveal what it reveals. And that was part of the recommendation for this client, because they were recognizing, they're like, look, I know when these patterns come up. I know when they come up. I could feel that energy, and I could feel how. So it's not enough to just recognize that, but actually to push a little bit ahead, do that work to be in that neutral position, as you were mentioning too. So just throw that out there as like a way of recapitulating what you just said here.
It's a thing. Like, I noticed too, because I was working on so many athletes and ex-athletes, was the main thing that caused a man that was a pro athlete to be depressed afterwards was they couldn't find anything to access the zone again. Because I was like, the holotropic thing is finding patterns, as you already said. And, I've always had that, like, ability to like kind of, connect the dots. And I was just listening to all these different people. And for me, athletics was complete. Like when I was done in football, I knew I was done. I was done with football before it was done with me. I was done with football by the end of my junior year in college. And like it went on for another 5 years. So I was listening to all these grown men that were excellent. Like they were excellent. Their bodies were excellent. They were in the top percentiles of earning, and women loved them. And so I would just listen to them because a lot of them were like having a really hard time not being in their sport anymore or not having that. And I kept hearing, I kept like hearing the same thing, and I was like, getting to the point of preparation, right? Like the best book that actually described it, I read, I think in like 2014 or 2015, and I always misquote the name of the book, but it's something like Inventing Superman or Creating Superman. And what the author was indicating in that was that essentially you need the preparation, you need God-given ability, you need danger. You absolutely need danger. And you need to have skin in the game, meaning you're invested. Like there's an aspect of your conscious mind that is invested in seeing the outcome a certain way. And when you have that myriad of things that are in a situation, then the zone will appear. And the reason he like brought all that up, because the people that had the most extended windows of the zone were the people that were doing these squirrel suits, because there's a certain very specific type of brainwave that is there when you're in the zone. It's not just alpha. There's some other brainwave that's in there. Out of the people out of his test group that he was able to study, and so when you're diving in these squirrel suits, man, like you got skin in the game. There's a ton of danger. You've prepared like out of this world, and you've had the talent to survive. Like you've had the talent to first survive, jumping out of a plane, like all the different ways, all the ways that you have, the things that you have to graduate to actually then be jumping with a squirrel suit, right? And so these people could be in the zone for like minutes. And like for me, the zone would occur like this was back in athletics for maybe like a couple of seconds at a time, And then I found with body work, I was extremely vested in the people that I was working with, because I had made that, that proclamation that I was going to be a benefit. I'm always about community building and having my community, like people be healthy and happy, right? And so, and then the danger aspect of it for me, I come to find out, was the part of my personality was I was always telling people things that they didn't want to hear. And when you tell this to somebody that's like bigger than you and badder than you, that could be a dangerous situation. Or you're telling that to somebody that has millions and millions of dollars, that could be a dangerous situation. Like there's all these things where I was like, because when I was reading that book, I was like, I do drop into the zone quite a bit in my body work, but I'm not. What's the danger aspect? And then I looked at it and I was like, the things I've said to the people I've said them to, like, not smart, like not couth at all. If you're looking at it from a worldly perspective, right? Like if you're trying to get likes or trying to get clicks or whatever, I've just never, like, when I first met my wife, I remember the first time we were going to go visit her parents, and she's like, I love you a lot, but you can't come out all guns blazing. And I was like, no, but I'm going to be me. And, and she's like, you have no credibility. They don't know you. Like people don't listen to people that don't have any credibility. She taught me what it meant to have credibility. Right. And so I was like, oh, you're right. Because they don't know me from a hole in the head. Like, why should they listen to me? I might just be like another crazy boyfriend or whatever. And she was right. Like you need that level of credibility in certain situations. So all these things was like, I had, I think at one time in my massage career, because where I lived in Costa Rica, there were like a ton of like CEOs and people that had like been like titans of industry that would have like their vacation home or their vacation rental down where I lived. And it was somewhat similar. It was an analog to what I had when I lived in Florida, because the same thing in South Florida, like a ton of northern, people that live up north would have like their winter home in Florida. So it was like a very similar mirror to what I experienced when I was a young kid. So I was always having these clients that were like the CEO of REI, or like name whatever venue of industry there was. I'd be like, oh, you're the man or you're the woman. And I'd be working with them, and they would be asking me my counsel. And I was just like, this is really odd. Like, I'm a nobody. I'm a massage therapist. I'm a dirt bagger in the jungle of Costa Rica. Like, what do I have to add to your life? But it was just like the situations where I was when I look back at it in retrospect, putting myself in situations that were a little bit tenuous, given the gravitas of certain clientele that I was speaking with.
Yeah, that's really, yeah. And it could be like danger is just being like, I'm my reputation's at stake. It could be something from an ego perspective too, in the case of just
dude,
like,
and
what was it like to tell the truth?
Think about it. Like, literally, I would be talking to like, I had a client that was like mega millionaire within the field of cosmetics. And she made a ton of money. And she wanted me to do a like building project for her, and I massaged her and everything like that. And I was telling her like, yeah, the other day I got my hands were all chewed up from a building thing that I was doing. And she's like looking at my hands. She's like, you don't have any wounds on your hands. I was like, yeah, I soak them in urine. Now, that to me is like totally like, yeah, it works. But if I was like one of these people that was like, like had a little bit more forethought or stuff like that, that's not something I should have just shared. That was totally.
But you were sharing it to a cosmetics person, and they're probably like, "Oh yeah, no kidding. That's what we put in all of our."
She was above that level. That had like, she did not know urea was pee. Like, she didn't know that. I had to educate her on her own products.
That reminds me to ask you, what do you do to ground out these like big time, like if like this big time energy of like touching people? I mean, putting your hands on people can really be, for a lot of people, I've seen some massage therapists that get really worn out energetically.
Yeah.
What are some tips?
Well, now I only take on like 5-6 clients a week. Like, back in Costa Rica, I had a lot more massage clients, and I was always barefoot. And I learned, I had a mentor in bone setting that was incredible. And he taught me, I was in my mid-20s when he taught me to put on surrogate hands. So just like, your mentor was telling you like, the pulse will only reach this high. The same thing with me is like, I'll put on surrogate hands before I work with anybody. And I literally give every session to God. Like, I find a lot of body workers to be not good. And the reason why they're not good is because they're doing it. And they think they're responsible, right? They think they're the one doing it. And if the person feels better, it's because of them.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
And those people that are in that frame of mind, they're not healers. They're not doing it for the right reason. They're doing it for money. Because I've been around dozens of them. The ones that have the most identification with themselves as being the healers are the same ones that have the most problems with grounding out. It's directly proportional. Whereas the ones that are where the function just happens through them, they have zero problem grounding out, like none.
Yeah, that's kind of like one of my apprentices asked me, how do you handle all these people coming in and telling you that you helped them and their family, or, you did this type of stuff? And I don't remember that stuff. You know why? Because that's how I ground it out. I just say, well, glory to God, I say that in my heart. I give it up to God. Like, this is the work I'm doing with the plants, or I give the plants credit. Oh, the plants did it, knowing that plants are the creation. But yeah, it's not up to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in the, like, this is all just happening. My favorite Indian philosopher, he said, there's only one problem, and it's identification. And I believe that. I wholeheartedly believe that. Like, in interviewing Jerry Marzinski, I think we've had like 8 hours of conversation, and he's telling me about the demonic realm and stuff like that. For those of you that don't know him, he was like a clinical psychologist at some of like the worst, I guess you would say penitentiaries in the United States. And he was the guy that they would bring in when somebody was like, supposedly in a psychotic break or whatever. And he saw some of the things I saw in some of my clients and people that I worked on through the years. And it was like, a lot of times people will have walk-ins. Now, the only time that there's a walk-in or a possession where it is really detrimental to all involved is if the person is identified with it. Like, I've been in other ceremonies where there are walk-ins and the person is not identified with that as being them, as this is me, that I, me, my mind. And if there's no I, me, my mind, guess what? You're clean. So when you're dealing with, like, if anybody out there is like trying to find a massage therapist or a chiropractor or anything like that, and they're pushing you towards their credentials and they have an air of haughtiness or whatever, literally just walk in a different direction, because they're identified with, if anything happens, it's because of them. No, go. That's not going to be a benefit. Even if you feel like some immediate relief just because you were touched or however the interaction goes, those type of people will actually leach energy out of your system.
This reminds me of your astrology practice, because right now, I guess the podcast, the Res of Nature podcast, is born coming into the sign from the celestial point of view, from
Right.
the type of astrology that you do. So in tropical astrology right now, we're there's no doubt that we're in Sagittarius, which is, one way of looking at it, with the seasons and everything like that. The type of astrology that you've talked about is using the sky,
Yes.
and you've kind of called yourself, like, you're an avid sky watcher. So in order to know the season that we're in, you have to engage with the external environment. And I love that, because it makes so much sense to me, because it's like, in order to know the vitality or the medicine of the plants, you have to have this, it's one thing to read it in a book. It's another thing to get a jar of it that's powder. And it's another thing to actually grow and recognize the similarities that a plant, an archetypical plant, will have over seasons. And the same thing with the sky. So right now we find ourselves in this little tiny segment where the sun is occulting the constellation of Ophiuchus. And it's just a small little segment of the zodiac. And that's what makes the zodiac the 13 skies, or the 13 sign zodiac. And some of these, again, like outlaw traditions
Yes.
that you have. And so I just would like, if, we have a little bit of time left, and I just wanted to see if you could tell us a little bit about the sign of Ophiuchus. One of the things I'm interested in is like how it represents itself in the body. Like, for example, Sagittarius, in the Sagittarius season, we have vision, we have the hips,
Yes.
we have the liver, and, so on and so on. How do you, when in your practice, when you're doing your polarity therapy, how do you perceive Ophiuchus, or the imbalances of Ophiuchus, or where maybe people were born in, or how do you read this as an astrologer, not only where people come into this world, but prior to? And tell us all about Ophiuchus, please.
So Ophiuchus is the Jesus archetype. Before they changed to the Gregorian calendar, no matter what anybody wants to say about whether it's a true sidereal astrology or it's a tropical astrology, once again, it's 180 degrees in direction and looking and like how you're observing something. So in true sidereal astrology, you're looking from heaven down towards earth. And nobody can argue there are 13 constellations on the plane ecliptic. Ophiuchus was the one that the church took out. And that was the one that allowed the Gregorian calendar to be what it is, today. And essentially that constellation, it's small, but it's the only one that's above the plane ecliptic. Like if you're to see the sky lore, you have the tail of Scorpio is stinging the foot of Ophiuchus. And Ophiuchus is doing this thing where it's a lot like Sagittarius, that it's pointing to the center. Our friend Mario Garza, we did a couple podcasts where we were talking about the two sides of the coin of Cancer and Ophiuchus and Cancer in Sagittarius. And it's because Ophiuchus, you have the depths. Ophiuchus is the exalted highest aspects of the scorpionic energy. Earlier you were talking about, you had the client and they were presenting, the deep brooding of the Scorpio. Well, that represents the lowest of the low. And when you look at our light cycle, when the light is descending and going away from you, it's pulling the heat out of your body. So even though, post the December 21st date, the December 21st through 25th, after the 25th, 26th, 27th, now the light is coming towards you. So you might actually have a colder, quote unquote, colder months, but it doesn't feel as cold because when the light is coming at you, it has a different qualitative feeling than when the light is receding away from you, even though the thermal gain of your area might be greater.
That explains why Green Bay Packers fans at Lambeau Field in January, they have their big old beer bellies showing, but in October they're freezing.
Yeah, and because I'm oddly enough, I'm an oven builder. Like I build rocket mass heating systems, which have a lot to do with fluid dynamics. And I've been saying this for quite a while because I didn't know that this was like a known thing in Egypt. But when you have the Eastern light coming to you, the Eastern light is piercing. It's penetrating. So even though your afternoon, which means after the zenith of the sun, you might have more thermal gain, your body is translating the thermal gain for the quality of the light. But I tell you what, directly afternoon, after the zenith happens, the quality of the light is already diminishing, even though the thermal gain is greater. It's the same way for the cycle of the year. Ophiuchus is that time where the diminishment drops you to the center. And the symbology of Ophiuchus is he's just above the plane ecliptic and he's pointing to the center.
It's like a Rukin figure. My favorite way of seeing it is you're actually looking at his back and he's going up. And as a Rukin figure, it's like from the audience's point of view, it's like, what's he looking at?
Exactly.
He's looking at the center.
Yeah. And that's the whole thing. It's like, for a supercomputer to work, for a quantum computer to work, they have to freeze it to absolute zero. It has to be as cold as they can possibly get it. And it's going back to being the witnessing awareness. When you're the witnessing awareness, you are in jurisdiction with your creator. You are in this world, but not of it. All these things are signaling the same exact thing, right? So there's a concentration. It's the highest time of concentration of energy collapsing to the center before the activation and then the movement of Sagittarius.
What organ systems or body functions does it rule?
I find it rules the absolute negative pole, which is your perineum.
Yeah. And that also relates to the Christos and the cerebral spinal fluid and stuff like that too.
Yeah, like the fix of all fixes that I can't do with anybody except for my wife is the perineal adjustment. Like literally that would eliminate, 99% of body work. Because you have all this energy that's trying to rectify through all these, ancillary and subsidiary channels in the body. And I'm speaking from a truly polarity therapy perspective, not like any, biochemical perspective. And it's just really the cerebrospinal channel, you have a positive polarity right here on the chin, which this is the very first bone, and it has its polarity in the pubic bone, in the pubis. And that I work on a lot, especially with women that have just had, just gave birth, things like that. That's like an instantaneous adjustment. But for like the bigger things where like a person is just like completely out of whack, the perineum polarity fix is like, that is
It's something I can do with the tuning fork. That's actually one of the first things I do is that. It's not the perineum, and I'm looking at a holographic person, by the way. So there's no, and maybe culturally also this is why there's like a tight tight ass culture that we have here, where people are like averse to humor. But adjusting what I call the earth flower, which if you look at the my favorite example is an apple of the toroidal field. That's like, what we have on the bottom of the apple is a flower. And that's kind of like what I'm trying to line up. This is something I've learned from Eileen and our buddy Chance as well. And then from there I go up to the top, and I really like to work on that I guess that Ophiuchus southern pole first, because it really is out of whack for a lot of people.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's because it's the exalted aspect of the generatives, from an Ayurvedic perspective. But to me, it is like it. I don't want to say this incorrectly. The center gives you neutral. And so neutral is not 50-50.
You've spoken of dynamic disequilibrium,
right?
So and that's how I feel it too. That's how we discussed it too. Is like you have to work, and then you downshift into neutral.
Right. The neutral is always showing you moving from one state to another state, and so the perineum, because like in athletics, right? I noticed this at a very, very early stage in my career with this, is that all the athletes that could jump, when they jump, they lift their knees. All the basketball players, whoever's running, they're like a gazelle. It's almost like they almost levitate. And what they're doing is they're actually locking their perineum. They lock their perineum, and then they lock their second bunda, which is like, if you're just to bring your fingers 2 finger widths underneath your sternum and press into your diaphragm, that's your second bunda. And almost automatically they always do that. And in that lock, it allows the elevation and the spring to occur. And what I saw in like a lot of endomorphic women is like they had no perineal, they had no bunda control whatsoever, because all their movement was a lateral movement. They had no vertical element. They had nothing that was actually causing the male polarity of going up and down to happen in their system. So all the endomorphs, they kind of waddle like a penguin, right? And it was so obvious to me to see that. And then like I had some clients that allowed me to like actually do the adjustment on the lowest bunda, and dude, their bodies would change. Like they would start to get more mesomorphic.
To me, that's kind of like one of the edges of the plane of inertia of our own toroidal field, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah.
That's like a place where the stillness that our heart is looking for kind of like meets the edge of activity
hmm
or density, maybe even you could say.
Yeah. 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 That makes sense.
Well, Topher, I want to show some people some. I'm just like super impressed with your work here. I want to show. I know this is your old website here, but can you see this on the
Yeah.
screen?
Yeah. I can see it.
Okay, cool. So this is some of your work. I mean, look at this beautiful interior. Oh man, you're making this with your hands.
Yes.
You're making this with materials that you've harvested in a particular astrological cycle so that they hold their water in the perfect way. I mean, high-minded artisanal work. This isn't like just building with a bunch of concrete. Sacred geometry, principles of sacred geometry in your domes,
Yes.
and for residential, for commercial, for spiritual practices and ashrams.
hmm
And you've been building a lot of domes lately.
Yes.
And I just wanted to introduce this before I show the Black Gold Biochar
hmm
page that I want
hmm
to share with the people too, because you have a dome that we can visit
Yes.
on the weekend of. Tell us about what
The
you got
Elementals
planning.
Festival. Yeah. Yeah. It's really kind of fun. Rebecca Steele, she does a lot of event coordination. In the past, she was part of an Acapulco and Liverpoco and all these, and she's just like a event mastermind. She ran the Biggleson event, the Terrainology conference that I was a part of out in New York, and had just an awesome time there. And at the end of the event, she was like, we need to have like a Tofa Palooza. And I was like, well, let me just like reach out to like all the people I've talked to that I really vibe with in the podcast. And like within a day and a half, everybody said yes. So I was like, all right, it's on. And then Owen Benjamin, he has property here in Missouri. And I said, Owen, how much would you charge? Like, one, would you be cool if we had another festival on your land? And how much would it charge? And he was like, yeah, go for it. So it was great. I mean, literally everybody I reached out to, except for like save one or two, was like, yeah, let's do this. This sounds like so much fun. So, and what was really kind of cool for me with that conference was it was the first time I was ever asked, like, why did you start a podcast? And I was sitting there with like one of the people I respect the most in the I guess you would say the informational teaching, web. And that's Dr. Andy Kaufman. And he was sitting right next to me. And I was like, you know what? I actually started a podcast because I was lonely. I really wanted to meet all these great minds that I was listening to. Like, I wanted to talk with these like awesome people. Like, that was literally why I got into podcasting. I remember being like a nervous fanboy the first time I talked to Tom Cowan or Dr. Jennifer Daniels or all these people. And they've all since become friends because I genuinely just wanted to like talk and just be in their ear, you know what I'm saying? And
Yep.
I think that goodwill is really paying off because people have felt that and they're like, yeah, I would love to be part of your thing. So we'll have Eileen McCusick at the event. She's gonna be there in her big RV. She's coming up from Alex Zeck's event, the Confluence, just 2 weeks before. And then Alec is coming up with his whole tribe, and then
Buddy,
we're
nice.
gonna have Chance Garton of the Interverse podcast. He's emceeing.
Yes.
We have Owen Benjamin is gonna do his thing on slaying a wizard. his book launch, and it's just we have so many killers. Andy Kaufman's going to be there, and
And yours truly.
Kyle Denton, my man, and we're gonna. I'm putting you right next to Chris Winters of the Fertile Current, and just
Yes.
have you two wizards just have a wizard off. And yeah, we have like there's so many different people. I don't want to bore people with the thing. We'll have the full list. I just got the corporation papers today in the bank account. So we're going to do our pre-sale. I don't know when you're releasing this, but we're probably going to do the pre-sale the second week of December.
Cool. So yeah, this will probably go out in a few days from now, but I would like to include the information for the pre-sale in the show notes. So
Okay.
we'll figure that out.
Well, I'll have that within a day, just when the site, because we're doing it all through, Rebecca has the site. There's apparently like this ticketing site that she uses for all of her events that it's so easy to plug and play. She just needed all the corporate and bank and insurance information first.
Yeah, amazing. You asked me to the element that I get to present on is ether.
Yes.
And I'm super stoked about it. I'm like, oh wait, you told me and Chris Winters, like the two long-haired bearded Vata guys.
Yeah, man. Well, he's like between the two of you, like you guys are really on the cutting edge. Like I feel so excited just to be in your presence with that.
Yeah, I'm super excited too, because this is going to give me a chance to really refine how I can what I'm thinking about in terms of like the etheric condensation of the plant matter, from the realms of the ether, but also the sponsoring element that gives that is the shape that every other element can find its way into.
Mm-hmm.
This will be really fun. And then also it's going to be a great time. May 8th through the 10th is when you have it. And that's
Yes.
Mother's Day weekend, right? Also like in the middle of Taurus season in a hay field. It's like, doesn't get much better than that. Like it is going to be so awesome. I love being there. Last time I was at this property at the First Beartaria is where we met. And I did some herb walks there, just kind of like put my own herb walk together. I would love to do something like that too. So I'll talk to you about that. Maybe I can.
Well, that'd be awesome. I would love, because I need to learn that wildcrafting. You and Adam Stevens, he's we call him Mr. Permy Bear, but he's one of my partners in this venture. And man, he's been a godsend to my education here with learning, what used to be the savanna, like what now is like the acreage that we're on. You guys could have so much fun nerding out with the wildcrafting scene here.
Yeah, I love that guy too, and I'm looking forward to having him on because he's just a fun guy to talk to as well. So it's going to be great to get down there, and I hope that for people who are listening here are interested in some of these brilliant minds that were mentioned. This is going to be a great gathering, and not only the thing about like learning about the elements and hanging out, but it's really is this fifth element of coalescence, gathering together. The lessons themselves are kind of in themselves a gravy overload, but when you are in the coherence, it's like an array.
Mm-hmm.
And it just elevates, like it'll just continue to elevate your throughout the rest of your week, throughout the rest of your month, throughout the rest of your year. This is memories, and this is a family friendly place and gathering as well, from what I take it, right? Because you're a family man, I'm a family man. I'm bringing my family there. I'm looking forward to my kids, romping around with your kids and hanging out and jumping around on hay bales, and then and it's just going to be a great time. So thank you so much for that invitation. It has really made my day. And also I want to thank you once again for kind of pushing me to do this. And,
Wonderful.
And I also want to thank you for your friendship. Like you're a solid dude. You are an inspiration to me. I really enjoy listening to your podcast, and I love your biochar. It is so good. Here, I'm going to bring up this screen here just to show the people. Black Gold Biochar. This is where you can get it. You can it mentioned here that you're getting this biochar for the the materials to make the biochar from like Amish and Mennonite
Yes. Yeah.
mills, which is great because I was thinking about that today. I was like, I never seen an Amish guy at Home Depot.
Yeah, right. Right.
They know what good quality wood is, and look at the price point of this is just beautiful. $35 for this is for 5 gallons for the starters pack.
Yes.
And that's, I mean, this is a really, really great. I mean, as far as the quality goes, you really can't beat that. So head on over to blackgoldbiochar.com and tell my guy, Christopher Gardner, that Kyle from Tippecanoe Herbs and the Resonature podcast sent you. And so thanks again. Once again, do you have any closing thoughts you want to leave with people, or any other links or places to send people?
Just if you guys like to, if you're into the Instagram thing and you like to just look at people doing DIY stuff, at Biocharisma is my handle. The reason why I switched the name for the biochar company was most people aren't aware that biochar is within Biocharisma. Like most. Like I was like flabbergasted at that. So my wife very smartly is like, no, we should go with Black Gold Biochar. That's something that, people that's unmistakable with that. Biocharisma is very kitschy, but like, I mean, there's just so many people that didn't see that in there. So but all my social media stuff, if you're into the media side of things, I've had excellent guests like Kyle. I've done over 300 spots the last 2 years. It's almost 3 years, and we're in December. So, and I just really love the education side of things. I can, like, that's where I get the juice. Like, I love talking to people about this stuff. So on Instagram at Biocharisma, you can see like my little experiments that I'm doing. Those videos are never more than like 2 or 3 minutes. And then on YouTube, I do live stream. It's also at Biocharisma. I can't put my podcast on there because they've taken it down too many times. But yeah, and then like all the other things like Rumble and BitChute and stuff like that, I'm all also at Biocharisma.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time and your attention, buddy. And I really appreciate you. And hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.